You know, one of the people that I just love is the guru, Amma. And she has an app. Everyone needs an app, especially Amma. And she's had a quote up all week. And I have been looking at this quote because it is speaking to me. So if it's speaking to me, that means I'm going to be speaking about it to you. And so I want to share this, this quote. She says, spirituality is loving yourself and accepting what comes. Detachment is the attitude of acceptance, knowing the nature of the world and people. Accept the sugar as sugar and the salt as salt, the cow as cow, and the elephant as elephant. Don't try to see the cow as elephant and the elephant as cow. Though sugar and salt look the same, you put salt instead of sugar in the chai and then complain about the taste. The mistake is our own. We mistook salt for sugar. See each at their own level and accept them as they are. So what came up for me was there's so much richness in that quote that I thought I want to take it into kind of a 4-step process on how to, kind of unpack that, because there's a lot of impressive things that are being said here. The first thing I noticed was that this is a conversation about, the first thing she says is spirituality is loving yourself and accepting what comes. And I thought about unconditional love, like loving ourselves in a way that's unconditional. What is the source of that? When we look at who Spirit is inside of us, and knowing that that Spirit is eternal, that it is the divine spark, that there's no separation from it. A friend of mine was reminding me this morning that there's no such thing as separating ourselves from the love of the divine, that we just can't do it. But the only way we can do it is by taking on that we're separate. So I started looking at what are the times when I feel separated from that love. I mean, I know that Spirit in me is divine. I know that Spirit in me is perfect. I know that Spirit in me is love, that it is exuding this power of Spirit, and that it does that just because it is. I don't have to, use my ego to boost it. It doesn't need me to, amplify it up. It doesn't need me to try to, tap into it and to crank it up. What it needs me to do is simply allow it to be, to that light to shine through me. So what is it when we start talking about unconditional love? One of the things that comes up, that's been coming up for me in my ministerial program is, I start to see my own shadow. It's really kind of amazing. A few years ago, I didn't think I was perfect, but I kind of thought I had it all together. Like, I remember my wife saying, I've known you for 12 years and I've never seen you tell a lie. And I had it that I was pretty far along on my spiritual journey. Not from a cocky place, but probably from a place that was like, I've done a lot of work here, And then ministerial school comes up, and everything that I thought was settled kind of comes up. There's a saying when you're in ministerial school, your whole life comes up and it transforms and it flips and it turns and it, like all of this, right? So things in my life start shifting. And what I start looking at is my own shadow. And for me, my shadow has always been that I can't make mistakes. Part of this was coming from kind of an abusive background, and people didn't know what they know now as far as child rearing. And so I don't really mean this to sound like a victim story, but I remember once, I must have been about 4, and I told a lie to my mom, like a big old whopper. I'm not smart enough to lie. I think that's why I don't lie, because I don't think I can get away with it. And I told her some big old whopper about something or other. And she sat me down and really explained why it was important to tell the truth. That people wouldn't believe you, that it's a part of who you are to tell the truth, that it's, and she really impressed with me, so I was like, I got that. Like, I'm gonna try to never do that again. And then she says, okay, now it's time for your spanking. And I was just like, what? I thought this was about the lesson, right? Why does she get to now will get to give me a spanking. I didn't understand that part. And that right there kind of defines a lot of what it's like encountering one's shadow. That it really is about learning the lesson. It really is about saying, oh, I get it, I've learned the lesson. But so much of our lives look like I'm being punished for making a mistake. Or, something bad is going to happen to me because I missed the mark. And instead of giving ourselves the spaces to acknowledge that we make mistakes, that we are growing, that we are learning, some of us, I don't know about you, but grew up with a hell theory, right? This whole idea, if you ever did anything wrong, that you were going to go straight to hockey sticks, and that was your fate, right? And unless you did certain things, you were going to go there. And I remember, how I love reading Paramahansa Yogananda books, and there was a story about this one man who was just so sure that, people who sinned were going to, go to hell. And so this man was worried about his son. So Yogananda was at his house, and the man says, my son he's partying, he's drinking, he stays out late. I can't get him to turn it around. He's getting older. I wish he would settle down and have a family. This man's just venting. And Yogananda says, do you have an oven? And the man's like, well, yeah. He's like, do you have like a really big oven? And he was like, yeah. He's like, well, we should crank it up really high and put your son in it. And the man says, what? I wouldn't do that to my son. I love my son. Why would I want him to be punished like that? That's sick. And he's like, well, that's what you're saying about God. If you love your son, don't you think God loves you? Like, the whole point of us being here isn't for us to escape some hellfire or try to avoid consequences of something that happened. The whole point is that we're in a curriculum to learn lessons. And so often when we start looking and engaging in a spiritual path, often that spiritual path, it's like at some point, these things start coming up for us. And the more spiritually in-depth we get, the more we are on a more increased curriculum. To where sometimes you're like, wait a minute. I know for me, I've said, I'm on this spiritual path. I'm increasing my meditation. I'm increasing my study. I'm increasing my willingness to be of service. I'm increasing my willingness to be a channel. Why is all this other stuff happening right now, right? And it could be that, as I've said before, we're kind of more university level curriculum than the curriculum I was getting when I was 4. And the belief and the understanding is, if I can love myself unconditionally when I see myself making mistakes and I learn the lesson, if I can love myself unconditionally through that, knowing that I am learning lessons, but I also know that there is a God spirit within me that is absolutely compassionate, that is absolutely for me, that is saying that was just a lesson because I want you to learn something. Right? That says, you may have come into this lifetime with certain propensities or a life story or a contract or something that you have to go through in this lifetime to learn. But right now, it's not about punishing you or torturing you. It's about learning. And when we know this about God, we can love ourselves unconditionally regardless of what we're facing. We can integrate our own shadow. And instead of saying, oh, I'm bad or I'm wrong, I can say, I'm learning this lesson. Oh, you know what, that's that one thing that I haven't, like if I could deal with that one thing, I'd be, I'd make it, And it was funny because I had a list of things of what I wanted to have, accomplished. And accomplishing the mastery of those things just means that something else comes to fill its place, because we're always learning, we're always growing. And so having that deep self-love, that compassion for ourselves, really gives us the space to engage in our spiritual practice in a way where we avoid judging ourselves. And if we can love ourselves unconditionally, then by extension, we can love other people unconditionally. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, says that love is within us. It cannot be destroyed. It can be ignored. To the extent that we abandon love, we will feel that it has abandoned us. And embracing love is our only problem. And embracing it is our only answer. So failing to embrace it is our only problem. And embracing it is our only answer. Through the power of love, we can let go of past history and begin again. Love heals, forgives, and makes whole. So no matter what we're dealing with, whether it's our mistakes or seeing the mistakes of others or seeing things that aren't right, we can always return to that space of love. Like everything can be resolved inside of that love, inside of aligning ourselves and being one with that experience of love. I know that Eliana Van Zandt, I always struggle with her first name. She says, in my deepest, darkest moments, what really got me through was a prayer. Sometimes my prayer was, help me. Sometimes a prayer was, thank you. What I've discovered is that intimate connection and communication with my Creator will always get me through, because I know my support, my help, is just a prayer away. So it's not that we have to reach out. We reach in, knowing that Creator lives in us, knowing that Spirit can never be separated from us, knowing who we are. And we know that the Creator, that Spirit in us, has only love for us, that no matter what the world looks like, we are always safe and protected in the arms of the divine, in these unconditional love arms of the divine. When we know that, no matter what we're dealing with, we're always okay. The second thing that I noticed from Amma's quote is accepting things as they are right now. So we give up resisting and accept what is so now, knowing that it's not the ultimate truth, what appears to be reality. It's just what's so right now. Sometimes resisting, it's like, I don't want this thing to be happening, or I don't want to be feeling this, or I don't want to experience this particular thing. And so when it's not what we created, it's not, I said I'm perfect, whole, and complete, and a whole lot of not perfect me shows up. What do I do with that? And what I do with it is I give up resisting. I give up resisting the idea of the shadow. I give up resisting the idea that something isn't working. And I accept that for this moment in time, this appears to be reality, and surrender to it for now. There's a quote that I found from the Reader's Digest of Joseph Rosenblum. He was pointing out that quicksand does not pull the unwary victim beneath its surface. A mixture of sand and quicksand is actually buoyant, making it possible for anyone who stumbles into it to get out. If caught in quicksand, experts advise, remain calm and free yourself by letting the buoyancy of the quicksand support you and by slowly swimming to firm ground. So many times when we get into a situation, when we think that, we're in quicksand, so that means that, we make it mean that we're supposed to sink and, they're going to find our bleached bones when they dig at the next tar pit or whatever, right? We think that's what's going to happen when we encounter something that looks like something we don't want. But in reality, if we would be still, if we would be calm, and slowly swim to shore, knowing that there's a buoyancy. When we look at what is the buoyancy in our spirit right now, no matter what we may be facing, the buoyancy in our spirit is that we are always upheld by the divine. We are always upheld inside of the arms and the spirit. And all we need to do is call out to the spirit within us, to the spirit outside of us. Like Eliana said, sometimes it's thank you, sometimes it's help me, but we always have that spirit within us so that we won't sink. We just need to know. We need to ground in our understanding and our belief and our knowledge that there is no such thing as you sinking beyond a level where you can't handle it, that we are always supported by the divine. The other thing I noticed about her, Amma's quote, is about accepting people as where they are right now. That it's not the ultimate truth about them, to learn to see them from the light of love. Not making them wrong, but having compassion for where they are right now, knowing that they are also on a journey. And so just as we gave ourselves permission to say, oh, those are my mistakes, or those are my feelings, or those are things I'd like to improve on. Just as we give ourselves that unconditional love, we give it to other people. And we say, you know what, I totally understand that that person is acting from their own pain. That person is acting from a place in them that feels incomplete. And it means accepting that wherever they are, however they are, that we give up resisting not just the circumstance, but resisting what we think that person is doing. And that leads us to our fourth step, is to have enough self-love to see what's so about a person as the situation and take it into treatment. So being love, being compassion, being tolerance, being unconditional love with other people doesn't mean that we ignore it and say, oh, that's not really so, right? When we do that, as Amma pointed out, we put the salt instead of the sugar in our chai tea, and then we complain about the taste, right? So then we say, okay, that person, I know that this person is, you know, a living, walking, toxic time bomb, and that's how they're choosing to be right now, and that's where they are. We can accept that and love that about them, but that doesn't, and we can understand that those are the facts right now without going into judgment. The only thing, if we were to respond from love and say, I still love that person unconditionally, I still forgive them 1,000 times over, I still love them with all my heart, and I give them space to do their own growth. And I love myself enough to understand that, but also to recognize when it's salt and when it's chai. To not ask a cow to be an elephant or an elephant to be a cow, but know for sure that even though there's this underpinning of love, that even though there's an underpinning of compassion, that even though we never give up loving them, we also acknowledge these facts and go into treatment for them. And going into treatment, let me rephrase that, we don't merely go into treatment for them. You know, in Science of Mind, we often talk about the way that we are interacting with the world is that everything is a mirror. So if I'm experiencing this particular thing with that person, I treat that in myself because we're one with that person. So if I'm dealing with someone who is cheating, or someone who is lying, or someone who's bullying, I go into myself and I treat that for me. Because we don't use treatment unless someone asks us for a prayer. We don't use treatment like, Lord, help that person. They've got problems, right? That's not how we use treatment. We go into treatment because we're one. Heal the parts of me that would be violent. Heal the parts of me that would bully. Heal the parts of me that would lie. Heal the parts of me that would do that. Until I'm clear that that wholeness and that healing and that oneness, when I heal it here, when I claim that oneness, it starts to heal there. To the extent that that person is willing and able to accept that growth, we have to start with our own healing here before we then reach out. It's very powerful. There's a Unity magazine article by Dr. Larry Dossey, and he was noticing that there was a father at a village priest in Yugoslavia, and this particular location had become a famous pilgrimage site where miraculous cures were being reported. And he stated that he could tell in advance who was going to be healed or cured. And he said they are the people who do not appear to be actively striving for healing. They seem psychologically empty, at peace, and receptive to whatever may happen. So as long as we're trying to impose our will, and instead of allowing, we actually could be limiting our capacity to receive the healing and the love and the wholeness. So the key is to just do allowing. Harry Palmer says, when you adopt the worldview that there is nothing that exists that is not a part of you, that there is no one who exists who is not part of you, that any judgment you make is self-judgment, that any criticism you level is self-criticism, you will wisely extend to yourself an unconditional love that will be the light of the world. And so we are called to be that light of the world. We are called to look at what is our shadow self and love it unconditionally. We are called to see what needs to be seen and know what needs to be known, and know that no matter how the world looks, that we give up our judgment of it, that we give up our resistance to it, that we accept it right now as it is. But we know that that's a snapshot of this moment, and this moment will never exist again. So what do we do with that? We know that this power of the divine in us is more powerful than any darkness that can ever exist. We know that power of light within us is the light of the world. We know this power, this light, this universe that is within our grasp is absolutely perfect. And when we know who we are, and we know who God is, and we know that we can, with treatment and our intention and our mind and our heart and our spirit, channel that divine light into any situation. Just because it's this way this moment is not the ultimate truth. That the ultimate truth lies within us, and that each of us are called to be that unconditional light. That each of us is called to be that miraculous voice in the wilderness. Each of us is called to be that song, that melody, that beauty in the world. And when we know that that is the truth, and we are willing to accept that, absolutely anything is possible. Absolutely any outcome that is of the highest and best order is our actual inherent right. We just have to accept it. We just give up resisting and allow Spirit to walk in us, to flow through us, to be that. And that is who we are.